Hello and welcome to Fit After 40. Our guest today is Dr. Chris Stout. He is a licensed psychologist and former full professor in the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Illinois Chicago College of Medicine. He is the founding director of the Center for Global Initiatives, which is a global health nonprofit. They do work such as founding a kindergarten and an orphanage in Tanzania. We'll talk more about that. Dr. Stout is also a ultra runner, a mountaineer, and a guy whose bio is probably too long to cover in just an hour, but we'll cover as much as we can. Dr. Stout, thanks for joining us. How are you?
I'm good, man. Good to be on. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, welcome. Thank you very much. So let's start with your background. As a kid, you had some weight and orthopedic challenges. At age 12, you were clinically obese. That's a long way from ultra runner and mountaineer. What happened? What changed? Nutrition, environment, activity, all the above?
Yeah, probably a combo pack. That and puberty was probably the tipping
Sure.
point. Yeah, I had as a little boy, my folks had gotten divorced before I was one, and my father lived 1,000 miles away. I grew up in a very urban area of Dallas. And so it was just sort of like, my mom was busy. She was working, and I sort of didn't have the proverbial dad to, toss the baseball back and forth with. That was sort of amplified by the fact that I had these orthopedic issues. I had issues with my feet and issues with my knees and legs. And so I was sort of, just burdened by what I referred to as clodhopper, kinds of shoes, just these big, bulky,
Yeah,
heavy kinds of shoes. I think you and I, have talked off mics that you were in a similar
that's
situation.
right.
So you
I
know
had
what
the
those
same
were like.
shoes.
Yeah, exactly. So that I never had like my first pair of Keds, I think was like when I was 12 or something. I finally was able to graduate out of those. So even in elementary school with other kids and stuff, there was quite that kind of limitation. And I think, maybe a little bit of loneliness and stuff. I would come home after school, and because I wasn't, hanging out with the other kids, and I would just kind of treat myself to a bag of Oreos or Chips Ahoy or something and plop myself down on the couch. And it wasn't too difficult to be able to then be 12 years old and climb up to 185 pounds, so which was not
Wow.
cool. And then, again, as you and I have talked off mic, via your intro, my last name is Stout. So being heavy and being named Stout was really kind of like a great recipe for being a bully magnet kind of a thing.
Oh, kids are jerks.
Yeah.
Kids are jerks. There's no two ways about that. And then one summer, you lost a tremendous amount of weight. Was it
Yeah.
64 pounds? Is that right?
Yeah, your research is correct. Yeah, it was a little too much, a little too fast. I mean, as a psychologist, I've dealt with people with eating disorders, and I kind of look back on myself and say, I wonder, maybe there was a little bit of that with it. But
Yeah.
yeah, the other part of me is that I kind of, when I tend to get into something, I get into something. So. It was summertime too, and by this time, life had changed. It's a story for another show, but I'm now living with my father, and I'm now living in rural Indiana. So dramatic scene change,
Yeah.
and just now I'm the new fat kid, in a new
Right.
in a new place where nobody, pardon me, knows me. And I just really kind of honestly, enough was enough. So I started paying attention to what I was eating. I started paying attention to not eating, all these sweets and stuff, and got into when now I'm into these Keds, as I was telling you about. So I, started running, and I bought an $8.50 bicycle, a used bicycle. It was all kind of beat up, and got it into rolling
Yeah.
condition, and would ride it out in this, in the rural area where, it was not urban Dallas and nothing worried about getting hit. And and really, really, really obviously restricted my calories as well too.
Sure.
So the bad part about it was that I probably lost I kind of overshot too. I mean, I wound up going from
Right.
185 to 121 in 3 months' time, so that wasn't great. But then once kind of through junior high, by the time I hit high school, things started to kind of stabilize and got into track, which kind of made sense after the running part of losing the weight, and just
Sure.
kind of like those things as well too. I mean, even though track is a team sport, it's still really kind of you as the individual as opposed to
Right.
basketball or hockey or something. So that was really kind of the epiphany and tipping point of that. And then, by virtue of losing that weight and watching the macros, I kind of got a little bit, it's probably the start of me getting into nutrition and paying attention to what I was eating.
Yeah, absolutely. So starting as an athlete later in life than a lot of kids would, how do you think that shaped your relationship with sports?
Gosh, I mean, it's interesting to hear you say it that way because I feel like even just the little bit of track in high school, a little bit of soccer in college, and I never really kind of thought myself as an athlete.
Mm.
I probably still don't at a certain
Yeah,
level, and I don't know why that is. I mean, maybe it's just my definitions and my visions of when I think of someone as an athlete, I don't necessarily toss myself into that category, but I think the for me, and I know there's a lot around this because like with some of the sponsorships and I have, there's a lot of stuff around community and team and tribe and stuff
sure.
like that. But for me, it was still always kind of like the individual aspect of it. Like for
Hmm.
me, I could go, since I didn't have a coach or somebody saying, hey, you need to be in the pool at 5 a.m. or hey, you need to be on
Right.
the track or on the road by 6 and blah blah blah. I could kind of choose my own workout schedules and, which is a good and a bad thing because I probably could have been more efficient if I had someone that knew what they were doing coaching me or something. But I think the individuality aspect of it was something that was very helpful and very appealing to me that I could kind of hit the gas when I had the greater time and maybe a specific race that I was training for. And I could, either take my foot off the gas or tap the brakes when there was more work requirements or travel requirements or family requirements and commitments. So I could kind of, go back and forth that way. And again, back to being it just being me, not me being part of a team, I think allowed me to have that
Sure.
kind of flexibility.
Well, and a lot of the events you do are not inherently competitive, and I like that about running and cycling as well, is that really the person I'm competing against is me,
Hmm.
and yeah, sometimes you're neck and neck with that other guy, and you're like, all right, I'm gonna dust this guy, but
Yeah,
but but
yeah,
that's not what draws me to these sports.
yeah.
I will say I chuckled a little bit when you said you don't describe yourself as an athlete. Just reading all the stuff you've done, the mountains you've climbed, the ultras you've run, all of that. I don't know that any of that is accessible to the more casual participant, but
Okay, thank you. Thank
but
you. I appreciate that.
it's funny how our conception of ourselves forms early and is durable even as the facts sort of blow that out of the water, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I mean, it really is kind of you think about mindset in a positive kind of way of motivation and things like that, but there's also maybe sort of the shadow of it too, or the cast, the cloud over it that kind of maybe keeps you in a mindset that's not necessarily as motivational as one would want. So, and just actually to make a point too that you said about with
Sure.
our individuality and stuff. I mean, I'm a real rah-rah, for the stuff that I do. I mean, that makes sense. But like when you think about like, and you guys know this, probably better than I do, but like in a lot of times in ultras, if someone, has an issue that technically, in with air quotes, is your competitor,
Mm,
a lot of times people will just, stop and help
Yeah,
them. I
sure,
mean, how many other
sure.
sports, I mean, periodically you might see that in football with a bad tackle or something, like the whoever did it, wants to make sure whoever they knocked to the ground is actually okay. And I think that's, good sportsmanship and good ethics. But, I think you just, again, it's my bias, so maybe I'm more aware of watching for it, but I think you see that a lot more times with
yeah,
people on the trails and stuff. And there's a little bit,
Absolutely.
when you're out on the trails too, there's a little bit more, I don't know, at the stakes are higher. That if there's not a support crew, that can
Right.
drive over real
yeah,
quick, 50 miles deep into the woods or something.
Right.
So that
yeah, yeah,
that part of you're the individual on the trail, but you're part of a greater community that cares about your competitor, and it's that same competitor that you would help, and they would help you, but it's also that same competitor that makes you a better runner.
Indeed. And I think cycling and ultra running are exceptional for that kind of mentality. You know,
Mm-hmm.
if we're at a cycling event and I get a flat tire, I'll have three people helping me change it before I could get my tube
Yeah.
out of the bag.
Yeah.
And ultra running has that same mutually
Same.
supportive kind of attitude,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't see that
Mm-mm.
in the more hyper competitive sports, at least not to the same extent. I mean, if someone's hurt, maybe, but
Yeah.
no, you're exactly right.
Yeah.
Well, and even in
Um,
similar sports, like I don't think you'd see that in an Iron Man. Like
Mm-hmm.
Probably.
where it's so hyper. Of course, ultras also give you a little bit of the element of time to help you too,
Right, right.
probably.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Good point. I
you're out
will
there a whole day.
I will say too, I mean, just interesting, and not to get us off on a bad tangent or weird tangent, but where I'm up in Door County, Wisconsin, and we have actually, it's kind of cool. We've got a 50-miler race. We've got distance cycling. We've got a triathlon. We've got a half marathon that, shout out to my son, he's won twice. I mean, it's just,
Wow.
it's really kind of a neat area with a lot of, cool athletes up here of various ages and
Nice.
skills. But we had in our last triathlon, there were two people that had health events. One woman
Oh,
needed
wow.
to be fished out of the water. She was drowning. I mean, by virtue of like a heart
My.
attack, and she was a skilled senior elite triathlete. And then another guy was on his bike and had a heart attack. And
Oh my
two
God.
Wow.
guys behind him on cycling as well. Just, I mean, this is like, spooky, wonderful. They're EMTs. And so,
Wow.
yeah, so imagine that. Good
I
news,
guess
bad
if you have
news.
to have a heart attack.
Yeah, yeah. If you're going to have a heart attack, do it in front of a couple of EMTs that are right behind you. And they, and
That
both
is
these people were resuscitated and saved, and like, holy smokes. So I don't know, maybe
Yeah.
and again, this isn't Kona or anything, but still, the tip of the hat to
yeah.
those folks. So, but yeah,
Absolutely.
but again, to our general theme, I think it's not, it's not your typical, basketball game. So,
Right. Let's talk about the sports that you do participate in. We've alluded to several, the ultra running and the mountaineering, but what would you consider your primary sport? And just tell us a little bit about your background. And we should talk about the mountains you've summited, Kilimanjaro,
sure.
and so forth.
Well, again, I now that you guys, as external folks, have called me an athlete, I feel so much better about that. But I feel
Definitely an athlete.
yeah, okay, because I don't feel like, I mean, a lot of the stuff that I do tends to be, in a sense, experimental. Like, and maybe it is for everybody. Maybe your first 5K, your first 10K, your first half, your first full marathon, whatever, your first ultra. And, I joke with my son who likes to win races. I say, I like to be able to finish races.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm happy to finish. And podium is not even,
I'm with you.
yeah, it's not even in the equation. So anyway, so with doing those kinds of experiments, it's sort of like, can I do it? And what's that experience going to be like? Obviously, in the training and getting the miles in, you kind of get an idea and you tune into your body and you know what's working and what you need to work on. But I think that like what I've written about, and it's become, this is kind of more what I think is my brand, is what I call weirdo challenges. So
Okay.
I wrote about this. I'm a LinkedIn top voice, and I wrote about this a couple of years ago. That when I kind of started to realize, you do your year-end life audits and your goals for the next year and stuff, and I thought, man, I did a lot of weird stuff this last year. And there's things like almost like strength, like strongman stuff. So there's like tank curling and these again weirdo kinds of things, so people can
Yeah.
look me up on LinkedIn, just stick in my name, weirdo challenges, it'll Google pop up for you. But I like those things because they're different, because they're kind of fun, they're kind of quirky, and
Yeah.
and they're good challenges. I mean, they totally, for me, change my workout routine, to when I'm doing something that's much more lifting, like I did. There's the 100-ton challenge. I did that a few years ago, and the idea is that cumulatively you lift 100 tons within a 24-hour
Wow.
period. Yeah. So I will tell you, the training for that is not like the cardio, and I'm getting kind of big, which is unusual for me, So I thought, well, this is kind of good. So So I did that, and then and I try and make these things make sense. So I did that and a bunch of strongman stuff of the what's equivalent to tank curling with weights, and what's in literally like lifting stones and stuff like that. So it changes from year to year. I was initially sponsored by Hammer Nutrition in their motorsports division, so to speak. So I was.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was land speed. I joked. I said, "Hey, I finally found my best sport. I can sit down in a car." and,
Right.
and I don't know if you guys would call me an athlete anymore if that was the only thing I did. But so I did that for a year, and I did it as a fundraiser for our nonprofit. So I raced at Road America. I raced at Black Hawk Farms. I did something called the Ultimate Streetcar Challenge. I drove down to Arkansas and did something called the Arkansas Mile, which is land speed racing. I set 2 land speed racing records down in in a 2023 C8 Corvette. I just did 100-mile or 1,000-mile rally out east, and just all these kind of car related things, because I'm also kind of a car and motorcycle gearhead, motorhead. So that was kind of that year. That was that set of weirdo challenges. So for the climbing, it was really kind of like a lifelong, I don't know why, a lifelong kind of thing. Because basically, I kind of grew up in the flatlands of Dallas, and then the flatlands of Indiana, and then lived in Chicago for most of my life, and that's pretty flat.
No mountains there.
Yeah. So, but I'll tell you a cool thing about that, again, back to weirdo, is that in Chicago, we have some very tall buildings. So in the wintertime, there's stair climb races or stair climb events.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I've run up the Hancock Tower probably 6-7 times. My son, bless his heart, he wanted to do that as a little squirt, but I didn't want him running up the stairs by himself. So I ran up the full thing, and then you could run half of it. So I came back down and then ran it up with him. So I got to do it actually 1.5 times. So, and then he and I did the Sears Tower probably 3 times together. He and I and my daughter did the Aeon Tower together. So those are weirdo challenges. To run up and down a stairwell is really kind of an interesting way to get dizzy and hypoxic in the wintertime. So, so doing those things. But again, that actually, is super helpful for climbing. And so I would try to do these things that had, during these eras, where they made sense with one another. I mean, I couldn't necessarily go, like now where I live live on a bluff, so I've got some great hills that I can do hill repeats on running in the summertime, or I can do hill repeats now. I'm doing hill repeats with a 40-pound ruck and going up and down it with I'm doing an Everest base camp in about a month and a half from now. So that's, and this weather is awful, so it's like perfect for that. So back to your original question. So once I, got into all this running stuff, once I got into losing the weight, it was sort of like, well, I love to travel. I've been to 115 countries, doing a variety of also big surprise, crazy.
Most of them.
Yeah, big doing crazy things in these varied countries. And climbing was always kind of one of those itches. I was always kind of curious about it. Sure. And this was, again, I did Kilimanjaro in '92, so it wasn't like you see Alex climbing up the 101 on Netflix and stuff like that. Right. It wasn't like this wasn't a very popular per se kind of thing. So I don't know, I just reading books or whatever. Just I like to be outdoors. I like to camp and just be out in nature. So it seemed, again, kind of like this natural combination of cardio and lungs and travel and blah, blah, blah. So the short story is that in terms of climbing, I've done, I always do, the classic is the 7 summits. So I've done 3 of the 7 summits. So I did, and for those that don't know, the 7 summits are the tallest mountains on each of the 7 continents. So for Africa, it's Kilimanjaro. For Europe, this is kind of quirky because it's Mount Elbrus, which is technically in Russia, in the Caucasus. Yeah, and crazy cold, and that was a crazy climb. And then one that's just anybody could, take their dog with them and do Kosciuszko, which is in Australia. It's just basically a very, very low thing. But again, weirdo challenges, I joked. So I'm like, here I am already in Australia. I had actually been invited to give a talk in New Zealand. So I'm already in New Zealand. Well, if I'm already in New Zealand, I might as well go to Australia and, ping a summit. Right. So, and since it's so freaking easy, it's, you don't need a group. It's not an expedition. You don't need special gear. It's just basically
just a hike.
It's a hike. Yeah, it's a beautiful, pleasant hike. And so then I'm like, well, if I'm already here doing this, I'm scuba certified, so I should probably dive the Great Barrier Reef. So
That's on my list too.
yeah, so I joked I've seen the high points and the low points of Australia. So, but
Yeah.
again, probably not being the smartest guy in the room. It's probably not the best thing with nitrogen in my joints to go from even that a mild altitude to submersing myself underwater that deep. So anyway, I'm not always the best role model for using my brains, but anyway, that was fun and I enjoyed those, and actually I did those well, and because I'm kind of an obsessive person, I like the planning for it, I like the training for it. Actually, sure. I made mention about this Everest thing. I've got 7 YouTube videos now just specifically on Everest of what I'm doing for my nutrition, what I'm doing for my training. Yeah. So people, again, just go to YouTube and put in Chris Stout and they'll pop up. I've also got, 6 episodes about the motorsports, more than that probably, about the motorsports racing, that we did. So if people want to learn how to get into doing that and do those races. So those, again, kind of being adventuresome and liking to travel and doing that. But then this was all, my wife and I have been married 40 years. She's also pretty adventuresome. And
Congratulations.
So, yeah, thank you. And so we did a lot of this travel. But then my father-in-law said, if you're going to have kids, you can't be climbing these mountains, and doing all these other, kinds of things. Like I said, the Elbrus climb was a little, there's some issues that happened with that that I think kind of freaked me and my family out. But everything turned out fine. But it was not a good. There were challenges in it that kind of were make you take pause. But anyway, so my wife and I had this detente and said, okay, I will not do any more climbing while the kids are at home and little outside of the United States. So then that got me to get to do Whitney, which is the tallest in lower 48, and that got me to do Rainier and stuff. And then once my son and daughter and I are running up and down the stairs in Chicago in the winter, they kind of got the bug. They were runners. They ran track. They ran cross and stuff. And my daughter in October ran the Milwaukee Marathon. My son's getting ready to do the half up here. But like my daughter and I did Pikes Peak together, which isn't technical, but it's just a beautiful little time together. So the big long story to all that. I mean, it's just those kinds of things where we can kind of combine whatever else is going on with travel or what have you, and then as I think you guys know, then the Kilimanjaro is what led to what you said in the intro with starting a kindergarten and working, continuing to work in Tanzania.
Yeah. When we were speaking before, you described, being in nature as a meditative experience, and that's something that resonated with me. Would you say that is what pulled you into ultra running and mountaineering, is just the desire to connect in that way?
Yeah, that's a very good point. I think, again, I keep referring back to urban Dallas. It was such a contrast to go from that to then literally living on a 100-year-old family farm.
Right.
And, in my runs, I could go run back, tractor trails, versus, on the road or on sidewalks and stuff. And I think now as I've kind of gotten older and now to where we've retired to in Door County, I'm so surrounded by nature. We're on a peninsula. Like I said, I've got this hill I can do hill repeats on, and I think that it's fairly popularized now with good reason that people, the restorative aspect to your emotions, your mood, your worldview, feeling connected. I think you and I have talked also about just the opportunities to be barefoot, out in the grass and have that level of connection. I think makes a big difference. And then even with a lot of the travel that I do, obviously you generally fly in on an airplane, and therefore you're generally in a very urban kind of area. But I always try to, no matter if time allows, to spend time in any kind of natural area or rural area, of a different country as well too. There's so many differences and simultaneous parallels and similarities that I find it very enriching to the soul that way.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the psychological aspects of it a little more, if you don't mind. The ultra distance, you're out there running for 12, 14, 18 hours in some cases longer. What does that
30.
give you?
Yeah.
Sometimes 30.
Yeah.
What does that give you that a shorter distance, that a 10-mile hike doesn't?
Oh boy. I guess it's a parallel, and these are going to sound contradictory, but on the one hand, it's like, it's a meditative kind of thing. I mean, you guys know this
Yeah.
too. It sometimes, I mean, you can't. Tell me if this is your experience. Like, if you're road training on a road, you like, I'll find myself counting my steps, or whatever. Or I'm going to get to that next stop sign, or you do all those
Sure.
kind of little weird mind things. But when you're on a trail, you're probably kind of watching out to not trip over a root. You're getting ready to hop over a
Yep.
log. You don't. It's a different rhythm. It's a different pace. When you're out on a true trail and doing that, not a flattened hiking trail, but like a in the woods kind of thing. And I think that. Unfortunately, I mean, the ultras I've done aren't 30 hours of hopping over that, because that
Yeah.
would, man, be a whole different kind of race. But as the distances go, I mean, even with those kinds of things, you find your mind, going different places. I mean, I go forwards and backwards in time. I sometimes think about, what's coming up, and then I start to, it's almost a distraction in the way that it's then becomes problem solving. But other times I found myself on long runs of reminiscing and becoming real nostalgic, or something reminds me of a prior race or a prior point in training, or something. And I don't know, I just find that sort of enriching and rejuvenating to my spirit, so to speak. Not to be woo-woo about it, but I mean, it's a satisfying, kind of feeling. And I also, maybe not in anything that's like, maybe not running an ultra, but training for one. So it's really, again, back on my time, and there's not the finish line is my finish line, not someone else's.
Sure.
I find that my mind goes into very creative kinds of places, not in the sense of problem solving or sussing a solution to something that's going on at home or with a project I'm on, but like I carry this little Sony micro recorder rather than my phone,
Okay.
because a lot of times I don't run with a phone or anything. It's too heavy and I don't want to deal with it. But I'll have this little micro recorder I can stick in my shorts pocket, or wherever, or hold it in my hand if I have to. But because I'll have like ideas about something, and it's like, I don't want to be like a mile into a 10-mile training run and go, oh my God, I got to remember this one thing, for
Right.
the next hour or something, because it'll go and something else will come, and I'll be mad that I forgot.
Right.
So I just dump all those, and I just find it to be such a creative kind of outlet. And I'll come back in and I'll say to my wife, is like, well, how was your run? And I'll say, well, I got 18 new voice memos to myself,
Nice.
or something. So there's part of that too. And I can't help but think back to your earlier question that, part of that also is being out in nature, that there's just something
Yeah.
about the freedom of it, the beauty of it, the I don't know, the peace, if you will, of it, that just
Sure.
stimulates other kinds of things that just doesn't happen when you're at your gym, or doing crunches or something. So
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
it's a different kind of thing, I think.
So your whole weirdo adventure and all the or challenge, excuse me, it reminds me a lot of like the concept of a misogi. Is that kind of what you're going out here? Like these, just like a once a year challenge or something like that, where you can um, kind of you might fail. You should
Hmm.
probably have a pretty strong chance of failing, because that's what makes it a challenge. Is that sort of where you go there? And then also, going back to your thoughts on running here, like you said, you didn't want to go woo woo, but I feel that so much, because I actually do get pretty woo woo about running,
Uh-huh.
and like on a 100-mile run, and you've got a lot of this experience with this. I find on a 100-mile run, I like to do one a year at
Mm.
least,
Hmm.
because it's like a mental full body reset in some ways, because I think there's some advantage to just breaking yourself down that far, breaking
Hmm.
down all of your physical body, and then just kind of like using your mind to push yourself through it. What are your thoughts on that? Do you have those same kind of feelings about these long distance runs, or?
Yeah, that's a great point. It's a good observation too. It's like, I'm a big fan of do hard things, kind of a thing.
Yep.
And I don't know. It's interesting that you say it like it's like to have that. I get what you're saying, like having the big one thing. And I guess I never really thought about it in the sense of the one, but like this year, I mean, it's sort of like now that I take a step back, I'm going to have to, this will be group therapy for me, you guys. So, as I take a step back from this Everest expedition trek, that there's nothing bigger this year that's going to be happening for
like
me.
Masogi
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, it's kind of, yeah, I could say that, no, I don't do that. But then if you look at my behavior, it might contradict that. But
Right.
yeah, and yeah. So I
Mental
guess
perception's different, man.
yeah, true. So it's like, and I mean, honest to goodness, like it really, it has been a bit all-consuming, so to speak, because there are so many, parts that go into it. Like even for me, like I've got gear, but it's like, do I have the proper gear? And I got rid of a lot of gear because I kind of thought I'm not going to do big climbs anymore. And then this came along, this opportunity, and it's like, oh, I don't have this anymore. I need to get that and stuff. So I mean, part of it's the training, but I would say it's probably, I don't know necessarily that I have one specific one every year. It just so happens that 2026, this will be the Whopper, but maybe one as a kind of an like I said, like maybe the more musclehead, strongman kinds of things maybe was one for that year, because once you're working for one kind of thing, it makes sense to do others. Once you're training for an ultra, you might as well do a 10K or you're probably not going to do a 5K because that's a different thing, but you're probably going to maybe do a marathon or two in the preparation of doing the ultra as you build up to it, or maybe even if a few weeks after, once you've recuperated, you still got that level of VO2 max to where you like it, and your muscles are kind of cooperating a little bit better after something long, or at least that's my case for someone as old as I am in recovery. But I think it's. The other thing is I'm doing all these. I don't mean to be these as shout outs, but I'm a big fan of Go Ruck, and I just got some stuff from them, and they sent me a Embrace the Suck t-shirt. And I showed my wife, and she says, "What does that mean?" And I was like, "It means do hard things, and go for it and enjoy it." And it gets back to what the three of us talked about in the very beginning of mindset, and it's sort of like, yeah, I want to be, because she says to me, she says, how much are you going to be taking on the trail, and how much mileage you're going to be doing every day and all this. I said, I can't train for altitude, but for the stuff I can train is make sure my gear's good, make sure I'm not going to blister up in my boots, make sure I can handle, this amount of weight and, in a backpack, et cetera, et cetera. But I want to overtrain because, and I said this in one of my YouTube videos, I want to land in Kathmandu and be able to go, I am ready. This is going to be fun. Yeah. I told my daughter, I did a double marathon years and years ago, marathon trail run. And I said, and my mindset was, I get to run all day today. Not I have to, not even this is what I built up for, but it's sort of like the mindset of saying, this is a treat, and this is you, Chris, this is your benefit by virtue of all the miles you put in and all the other crap that you maybe didn't enjoy doing to be able to get to this point. This is your, not your victory lap per se, but almost like that like it's almost already over, that this is what you get to do now to enjoy it. And, and again, maybe this is, kind of what you were getting at, that the build up for it is a big deal. The doing of it, is almost kind of like this relief, but in the context of not being afraid of it. And that's, for me, more so mountaineering rather than ultras, because, technically, this is going to sound odd, but technically, you could get hurt doing anything. But technically, even in most ultras, unless you're kind of really way out in the boonies, something happens psychologically, and you just hopefully not, but psychologically you give up, or God forbid, you tweak something, and that's the end of that race. Yeah. When you're 17,000 feet on the side of Mount Elbrus, and you're still not quite there. And you're roped up with a bunch of other guys with crampons and ice axes and stuff, and you say in your head, I don't want to be here. It's like,
tough luck.
Yeah, tough luck is right. Yeah. You ain't going back down. You ain't staying in one space and in one place, and you gotta embrace the suck, and you gotta, make it on up to the top. And it's sort of like, I don't want to be in any position ever with anything that I'm taking on to have that. So that's why I kind of have to, as we all, I'm preaching to the choir, we all kind of have to overtrain so we don't have that
Yeah.
little naggy thing that we had maybe when we were first starting out to go, ooh, can't, like I joked, can I finish this? Ooh,
Yeah.
I kind of, watched, too many Netflix, ate too many cookies, ooh, I got this, not anything about like, oh, my knee's tweaky or, oh, I'm, whatever, but those lazy things that you kind of, should have been out and you weren't, kind of thing. You can't cram for an ultra, you can't kind of, make up those
Right.
things. You got to stick to the plan. So I think, those are kind of the differences in the kinds of things, the sports that that are activities, events, whatever that I and you guys, all take part in.
Yeah. So you mentioned
I have a
something that I want to zero in on a little bit, the mental aspect, because when you're doing these major events, the mental training is every bit as important as the physical training. Your body may be ready. If your head's not in it, you're not going to finish.
Mm-hmm.
And specifically, I'd like to ask how that spills over into other parts of your life once you've disciplined yourself to push through when it hurts, when you're tired, when you're cold, when you can't breathe.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You've conditioned yourself to push through a lot of this stuff. Um, when you're dealing with everyday challenges, how does that impact your ability to manage just normal life stuff?
Oh gosh, you ask at a time where I just came off a very stressful weekend of work stuff, where I would probably say it didn't have any application whatsoever. So, no, but it does. From I'm going to give you kind of a superficial answer, and then maybe get something
Sure.
that's not going to be profound, but maybe a little more deep. But honestly, sometimes it's like I kid you not, I'll do breathing exercises. I will just be like stressed and aggravated with something, and sometimes it's dealing with a technology that worked fine yesterday and is just
Oh,
full of bugs today.
yep.
Sometimes it's with people that I have responsibilities for. I'm a division staff officer in the auxiliary branch of our Coast Guard up here, and I
Wow.
oftentimes have a lot of personnel kinds of issues and stuff that come up, and those are not things that I can just kind of engineer my way out of a solution, so to speak.
Sure.
So in those instances, sometimes it's just just the frustration. Like notice, like I'll have shallow breathing. I'll notice that my respiration is up or
Sure.
whatever. And sometimes it'll be just I had Dean Karnazes on my podcast about a year ago, who's does
Yeah.
ultras and crazy wonderful guy.
Amazing guy.
Yeah, and I'd ask him a similar question in the sense of, because he writes. I'm like, and I write, and it's sort of like, well, how do you what do you do? What's your writing routine like? And he says, like, probably per every 60 minutes of writing, he'll break that up, sometimes in 20-minute increments, sometimes not that to the clock kind of a thing. But he'll go do push-ups, and he'll go do pull-ups, and he'll go do wall sits and stuff like that. And I thought, that is brilliant. So I've adopted that as well too. So in the sense of, because part of it is, I think it's a nice distraction. It's not just the physical of like, okay, I've been sitting here, I've been sedentary, my body's in a different, state right now. So if I simply, I do a lot of standing desk work, which has helped me out a lot
Okay.
as well too. But I'll just stop that, and I keep a, this sounds kind of weird, but that's my brand. I keep
Yes.
a 40-pound sandbag within 5 feet of where I work, and a Bosu ball. And sometimes I will just do 1 foot stands on that Bosu ball for as long as I can, just to kind of, get my lower extremities, firing again.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I will grab that sandbag and I will do deadlifts, or I will do presses, or I will do rows, or I will do squats. And
Sure.
and it's like right there, and I can do those 4 different exercises, as many reps as I want. And that kind of like resets my clock, and I go maybe make another cup of coffee or something like that, and then get back to my computer and start troubleshooting and problem solving. Probably, to be honest, 50% of the time, I can come back to it with, a good solution and, work through whatever that issue was. The other 50% of the time, it's like maybe I don't immediately solve it, but I feel a lot better. I feel more equipped, and then maybe I do some, productive procrastination and work on some other things first and then come back to it. But it's sort of like I don't know if this is where you were going with it, but it's sort of like I feel a lot of times like when we work, it becomes this intellectual, cognitive, mind-body disconnect. And then just like we talked about running or with feeling creative when I run, it's sort of like, okay, I'm doing something physical, but my mind's going and it's beneficial. It's the flip side of that. It's sort of like I'm standing or I'm sitting, writing and working on something on my computer, and the body's gotten disconnected, and that's bogging me down with what my work is. So let's go do something physical and then come back to what that mental was. So it's kind of a nice, I don't know, yin yang, but like out running, I'm still doing something intellectual. Sitting here doing something intellectual, I can take a break and do something with breath work or with something physical and they both benefit each other. It's a very symbiotic kind of relationship that way to your, the mindset question.
I do this.
Yeah, do you? Okay.
I work in two spaces, and I'm in my office right now, and there's a hallway, and then we have a machine shop, and I go out to the shop floor, and I've got a pull-up bar in between. And every time I transition from here to working out on the shop floor and back and forth, I knock out pull-ups.
It's like makes you feel better.
Yeah,
it's funny.
Yeah,
the sympathetic nervous system is supposed to get you away from a saber-toothed tiger, not make it harder to edit a PDF. Sometimes you need to burn off some of that energy before things work right.
That's right, and too, like to your point, like in between the whatever studio and the machine shop. I mean, it also if something becomes a habit, it diminishes. My opinion is it then markedly diminishes the self-discipline meter, so to speak. I mean, it's sort of like, we talk about mindset, we talk about discipline, we talk about doing hard things, blah, blah, blah. But, if you just sort of get into this, habitual aspect of certain, and the habits can be bad too. We all have our bad habits, but, that habitual thing of just like, okay, this is what I do. And I walk by this, I crank out a few pull-ups or, if it becomes routinized kind of a thing, then maybe there's probably those times, and I'll be the first to admit it, they're fewer than what they should be, but there's probably times where I don't need to be there frustrated by what I'm working on, but still to take that same break, grab that sandbag or stand on that Bosu ball and do that anyway before it gets to that point of where I'm, ticked off or, aggravated or feeling helpless intellectually.
Yeah. Well, it's not going to hurt you either way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's talk about how your training has evolved over the years. You're in your 60s now, although I believe you said metabolically, you're a lot of biomarkers. You're a lot younger than that. How has your training volume, recovery, intensity, and mindset, how has that evolved over the years as you have entered your 60s, as you are a little older now?
Mm-hmm. Great question. It's evolved a variety of ways, and I think now probably, and maybe it's just because I'm falling into the cliche of feeling okay, now I got to shift from endurance to longevity, or strength training to
Right.
whatever, maintaining muscle mass rather than building it or whatever, because biology is biology, but.
Right.
I would say, something that has zero to do with age is that, way back when, like we were talking about when we first started, of me being obese, was, just paying attention to my macros. That then, begat as I, because I ebbed and flowed with, athletic endeavors and activities and stuff as, becoming a dad and getting my first, big full-time job, and then working like, 3 jobs to pay off student debt and all that kind of craziness. Sure. That, workouts kind of took a back seat. But, I started watching what I was eating. I mean, there used to be, this predates, it's too old for you guys to know, but I mean, people used to say a calorie is a calorie. And it didn't matter if, and if I drank a protein shake or if I drank a milkshake, or well, I shouldn't say that, or if I ate
Coca-Cola.
Or if I, 150 calories either which way, or if I ate a Pop-Tart, or whatever, which I know we can get away with on an ultra race, but barring that, but I started paying attention to just, physiologically, you kind of dial into yourself, especially I think more so with doing ultra distances, be it, on bikes or feet or whatever, is that, when I did not eat this and I did eat this, I started noticing, my recovery time started to diminish. And,
Sure.
Chris, you and I joked way back when about, how do you know someone's a vegan? They tell you. So,
That's right.
so that's kind of
While we're
how,
on the topic of nutrition.
yeah, so there's my segue. Thank you. But so when I didn't say that when I grew up on a farm, that part of what my growing up on the farm was that it was it was a grain farm, but it was also a beef farm. And
Okay.
so there was plenty of, the slaughtered cow in the freezer kind of a thing. And, there's
Sure.
plenty of meat for every meal. And as I got into all that weight loss stuff and everything, it wasn't like necessarily did I become vegan or vegetarian then, because I did not. But I just kind of, honestly, it just kind of lost its appeal to me for whatever biological,
Sure.
natural. It wasn't ethics, it wasn't philosophical, it wasn't, anything. It's just, certain stuff, maybe you don't like turnips, whatever. You just don't have a taste
Yeah.
for it. So that was kind of easy to kind of give up, the meat thing, and I found that was beneficial. But I was smart enough to know, I still need to, backload with protein. And when I started off as a vegetarian, that was, super not hard. I mean, drank a lot of milk and ate a lot of
Sure.
cheese.
Dairy.
Yeah, plenty
Yeah.
of dairy,
Yeah.
and that was fun.
Eggs.
I love that. Eggs, exactly. I mean, my go-to was, a egg white omelet with a, milk and da 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 da, and that was great. And that was 30 years. That was 30 years of that.
But
And
you've been a vegan for a decade now.
yeah, so after that, and that was the transition. When I got into, when I was doing, starting to up my distances and doing my stuff and thinking about recovery, and again, this is, okay, let's call it 40s and creeping on to 50s. My recoveries were getting longer. I was getting achier. A lot of times we joke about taking a lot of vitamin I, ibuprofen.
That's right.
Ibuprofen.
Yeah, and I was taking 800 milligrams of that almost daily.
Oh,
Yeah, and I just
a
thought,
lot.
yeah, it sure was. And I thought, I'm not
Get your
doing.
kidneys checked.
Yeah, I know, I'm not doing my kidneys any favors. So it was just sort of that kind of a thing. I mean, my joints were achy, and I was taking Chondroitin. I was trying to supplement my way to, feeling normal and still being able to keep my miles up and all this stuff. And just kind of thought and again, I felt like I was too young to think, oh, this isn't age, this is just
Right.
my volume's too much or whatever. But I'll be damned if I'm going to decrease my volume. I just need to medicate, the aches and pains.
Right.
So, which,
Yeah.
smart me. So don't use me as a good example. So then I started hearing more about, the Christopher McDougall came out with the barefoot running thing and,
Sure.
all this other stuff about and I thought, well, what if? And I thought, well, again, big surprise, headlong, I'm going to be vegan. So then I, read all the stuff that I could find about, diets and menus and all this. And I drove my wife and my family crazy. And, it was all kind of this weird transition. And it's sort of like in some sense, like a lot of, here I live in, Dairyland, USA. I'm in Wisconsin
Right.
now. And people look at you, sideways of like, what? You don't, oh, you eat fish, right? Because you're vegan. And it's like, well, no.
Right.
Oh, you can have, here, have, milk, no. But the whole
The
reason
cow was a vegetarian. Is that okay?
yeah, exactly right. that bull looks pretty beefy, right? So I found that when I started to do that like I even switched from whey protein shakes to pea or soy and started experimenting with those.
Sure.
And I found wow, I kid you not, this is going to sound like baloney or like I'm representing the vegan non-dairy association, but the in the last 10 years for that kind of turning point, I could tell you I have probably taken a grand total. I'd have to do it I've never taken more than like probably 400 milligrams of ibuprofen. I have to think about it in days. So when I would take a dose, it'd probably be 400. One never did anything. But if
And
it was
that's four pills for those who don't
yeah, thank you.
track
Yeah,
the milligrams.
yeah,
That's
thank
a
you.
double dosage.
Thank you. So so I have probably so if I would do that, and I would never take it more than once a day. So if I dosed myself with that dose one time, I can tell you I have not had more than 7 doses in the last 10 years. I can say that in my heart of hearts, knowing that that is probably, if anything, conservative. It's not been over that. It's not probably even been that.
So very, very rare.
Yeah, and it's like it doesn't take a whole lot of that kind of evidence for me as a, trained in science to say, I think this is cause and effect. So, and lifestyle wise, it hasn't been hard, and then, you lean into, or I lean into it, and I read more about it, and I listen to a lot of Rich Roll podcasts, and, blah, 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 blah. So I have found that has been very helpful. I have found that, and now being in my 60s and maintaining that, and I'll also say, as a little bit of a side plug, I mean, my son, who's an amazing athlete, is 95% vegan. My wife is pretty close now to 100% vegan, and she is fit as can be and she's involved in a variety of different kinds of athletic endeavors. So, so a big plug for that. And, I know it doesn't fit for everybody. Everybody is different. Advice is hard. My best advice is try stuff out. If it works, rinse and repeat. If it doesn't, then try something else. But
absolutely,
yeah, for me in my situation with the kinds of stuff that I do, with the lifestyle that I lead, it has been very helpful with, just with whatever you want to call my lifestyle right now. I mean, my sleep is good. My blood work, like you said in this intro to this section, has been very good. It's like, a 20-something-year-old's. My testosterone is high. Which surprises me. My next birthday would be 67, and it's like, my primary. I had to get a medical clearance to be able to get on this expedition to Everest, and we did blood work. And I'm a nerd. I pay extra for the extra blood work, and do
me too.
DEXA scans and do all sorts of crazy stuff just because. Because I like it, and
Peak.
Yeah, and you also like to take a test when you think you're going to do pretty good too. So test me. Yeah, what's my grip strength?
Please,
Come on. Yeah. So I think, again, my best advice to your listeners is that, try stuff out. We're all an N of one. We're all, guinea pigs. I'm a big fan of Buckminster Fuller, and he referred to himself as guinea pig number one because he was always doing, not in the healthcare space necessarily, but in the intellectual, or Tim Ferriss or Rich Roll or Peter Attia or whoever, pick your guru. But try things out and see what works. And again, for me, the trying things out, the stuff I stick with tends to be around diet, nutrition, and lifestyle. And the stuff I like to play with and experiment is the weirdo stuff of, the different challenges that, like, I don't know, you guys are probably maybe familiar with the Murph Challenge, which is kind of more of a CrossFit kind of a thing, but that happens every May. And so I like to do that. I like those kinds of things because it tweaks my training. I'll be back from Everest by then, so now I've got to, do the next thing. There's something called now the GWOT that I'm doing, GWOT 100, which is like run 100 miles or cycle 100 miles or ruck 100 miles or row 100 miles, but do 100 miles sort of something, and it's a fundraiser for veterans and stuff, and it's basically around the war on terror. Yeah, so I like to do these things that sponsor. And then to go way back to Kilimanjaro and the start of my nonprofit, every climb that I do, like we kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier, it's a selfish kind of thing. When I would get up at 5 a.m. to go run, to then get that done before seeing my kids and then going to work all day and then coming back home and maybe doing a second workout or whatever. That's all Chris. That's all me. And I thought, there's sort of a like my father-in-law, you're not going out of the country again to keep climbing, while you've got kids at home kind of a thing, because it's a me kind of thing. So I thought, well, how you are part of an expedition. You are part of a team. You are, you work collaboratively with that group, and man, you get really close. And it still takes weeks to climb, but in a relatively close period of time. But how can I do that to make it so that I can make it be of others too? So one of the projects we have in my nonprofit's called Center for Global Initiatives, and one of our projects is called Summits for Others. So every climb that even before my nonprofit started, like we supported an organization called War Child, but every climb that I do as a sponsored kind of thing, so people can make donations. So I one time I had a graduate student of mine. And he said, I'm not going to donate like a flat fee, but I will pay like $10 for every 1,000 feet that you climb.
There you go.
Yeah. And he said, so just in case you don't summit. I'm like, wait a minute. So
you leave money on the table.
Yeah,
right.
exactly. Yeah. So there's a different kind of mindset and motivation with that. But to kind of make that point and to bring it back, to your original question on this branch of like, resilience and being in your 60s and stuff. I mean, I also have said in the YouTube videos I did, I'm kind of scared that I haven't climbed anything serious like this in over 20 years. And, I need to go into this with that same mindset before I do an ultra or before I do an expedition, feeling like I'm ready and having that mindset to say, this is going to be fun. There is not any stone that I have not turned over. There's not anything, that I've not thought about. Bad stuff like what if I blister right off the bat, or bad stuff, what if I get walloped with acute mountain sickness or HAPE or HACE. I've got plans for all those. And it's like, have I trained enough? Did I sit too much on the couch, or did I, get out and get the boots on? And it's like, no, I feel good the way I am right now, and I feel like I've dialed in the training. So, so being 36 or 66, I hope will not make a whit bit of difference on this, and, be able to, enjoy that time on the mountain, which gets back to your other part about, doing these activities and being in nature and being in a very special place in the world.
In a very special place.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's talk real briefly about Hammer Nutrition. So you're a sponsored athlete by Hammer Nutrition. You started out as a brand ambassador. What drew you to them specifically? Why Hammer?
This is gonna sound like a joke, but I was, I'm like the men's hair club. I was a customer, man, way back when they first started, honestly, it had to be by virtue of, I was at, some running store or some outfitters that, had, their little stand there, and there was, Hammer whatever's. They have a thing called HEED, and it's kind of funny from a behavioral psychological conditioning thing. HEED is sort of like their endurance drink mix, and I fell in love with HEED, and they have this lemon lime, and I am just like, I don't know, like a rat, and getting a certain taste or something, and being conditioned. When I smell that, when I mix it, or when I take that first sip, in training or in a race or something, it's like, boom! I am right. I am right.
Oh.
I am right where I need to be in training. I am right where I need to be in a race or something like that. It's so weird. I mean, so for all my climbs, for all my races, honestly, from anything like where you would carry something on you versus picking something up at a table at a water station, was always Hammer stuff, because and then they had a nice catalog, and then it became a nice website. Because it kind of predated webby stuff. Late 80s. There was no website for Hammer, so.
So you've been involved with these guys for decades.
Yeah, I had, and then with. I think like just one of their catalogs I had gotten, like to order stuff. They're very newsy, and they're very educational, because they'll tell you like how to.
I like that.
Yeah, so it's sort of like, well, how do I like they have great, and all this stuff's free too. You can download it off their website or whatever.
Nice.
I put it in my YouTube thing. There's a link that I created a whole. I don't know if you're familiar with the Issue, but it's like a place where you can put documents. So if people listen to my nutrition episode on YouTube, they can click in the show notes, and it'll take them to Hammers and a bunch of other stuff that I have for what I did for nutrition. And they're at a great price point. They have a lot of great vegan options that actually taste good. Their big thing too is no added sugar, which I really like. So it's
Okay.
sort of like I know if I don't have to like read all the the nutrition facts, sort of a thing.
Right.
So
Right.
then and so in reading all this, and I'm reading about how to fuel for 6 hour plus races, how to fuel for this and that, is like, okay, I'm with my people, I'm in my tribe, and then you keep reading and you see all these different athletes that kind of are all ages and all over the world, and all kinds of interesting motocross races to mountain bike races and ultras to marathons. And it's like, hey, I this is kind, and I was learning about races I didn't know anything about, and then I see some
I
guys
mean,
that,
that's a cool resource.
yeah, and they've got people climbing mountains and doing the 14ers and doing, all these cool things. So and I saw, oh, they sponsor people. Oh, they have, there's brand ambassadors. So I just got my gumption up and sent them an email and said, hey, here's kind of what I've done, kind of what I'm into. And honestly, I'm a big time fan. Check your own records, see how much stuff I've bought from you,
Right.
from whatever time you guys have been keeping track. And so they kind of took I think their process is that they start off, if they have an interest in someone, you start off as a brand ambassador, and
Sure.
then you get sponsored. So basically, it's sort of like, the good news for me is that if someone's interested, they can get a discount off their first thing, and then I get
Nice.
I get a certain amount of kit for free every year, and I get a
Yeah.
discount on all the stuff that I buy. So that's not, and then I get to be a nice guy at races or wherever and hand stuff out. So that it's a
That's always
yeah,
fun.
it's a fun thing. And they also sponsor Dean, and then that actually led to an introduction for Dean and I, and then got him to get on the show. So it's been a very nice relationship with them. They're great folks in all sorts of ways.
Very cool. Just a couple more questions for you. With your background in clinical psychology, let's talk about mindset, how that limits athletes or unlocks potential. We talked a little bit about it, but if you could speak about that just from that perspective, I think that a lot of people would find that helpful.
Sure. I think a lot of it, I mean, another way to maybe make it sound less scientific is, to think about it in terms of confidence. I think
Sure.
mindset has, you could, in my head, you could almost use them as synonyms. But I think that part of it becomes feeling like the what do I want to call it, the structure, the framework of mindset is having a goal, whatever that might be, and it doesn't have to be athletic, but let's use athleticism as the example. So if there's certain kinds of things that you want to accomplish, there's a reason for that. Why do you want to do that? Well, maybe I want to become a professional athlete. Maybe I want to, just it's a personal goal kind of a thing, a bucket list kind of thing. Maybe it's what I want to make my dad happy. Whatever there's a variety of different kinds of motivational reasons, and none are exclusive. Maybe they're a Venn diagram; they all overlap, and they're all
Sure.
16 reasons that are all there, and varying valence. But in the concept of thinking about that mindset, then I think it begets people kind of, like as Stephen Covey used to say, begin with the ending in mind. So if this is what I want to accomplish, climbing a mountain, setting a PR, whatever it might be, then how do I get there? And, what's my runway to, how long is it going to take? What is it going to take? How, what do I add to what I'm doing? What do I stop doing? What do I, is there a sacrifice involved on me or my loved ones or my job or whatever? And then, kind of once a person kind of goes through that, imaginary checklist, then, for me, I suss out, okay, this is doable. This is, I've kind of vetted it and it seems reasonable and it seems, realistic. It's, I'm not gonna go win Boston, but, here's whatever that sort of a thing is. Or to vet it and go, that was a pipe dream. That was really,
Yeah.
that
Sure.
that was kind of silly, okay, fine. Maybe there's other comparable things or whatever that are more accomplishable or what have you. I don't think there's, I don't know. My personal opinion is I don't think people get surprised of doing something, when they work towards it. Like, oh, I didn't really think I could do this. And then, it pops up. I don't think that's a mindset question kind of thing. I think, thinking about what it is that is important and then deconstructing it to the elemental factors of what it's going to take to be able to do that. And then going through it and doing it and maintaining whatever it is for you that maintains that level of motivation. Sometimes it's a carrot because you feel good and that was a great workout, or you like how you look in the mirror, or you like how the scale is responding to you, or whatever, or you're lifting heavier, or you're going further with same amount of effort, whatever your metrics are.
Yeah.
Or it could be the stick of like, man, I'm not at the level that I really need to be at, or man, I kind of goofed off, for too many days in a row, and now I'm making up for it now. So, you kind of get that tightrope, that delicate balance, that, back and forth kind of aspect with all those things. And then ultimately, depending upon what that goal was, of having the pleasure, like we've talked about today, that pleasure of feeling competent, feeling prepared, feeling like there's certainly still the challenge isn't diminished. It's still there as much, but maybe you're improved. Maybe, that 100 miles is still 100 miles, but you're not what you were X months prior to the day that you decided to really seriously in earnest, commit to doing that. And it's those kinds of mindset things that I think, back to your questions, like with psychology, is that, obviously they're motivational, but, then like we've talked about, how can you develop, like the little atomic habits kind of thing, where stuff becomes sort of automatic and routinized, as opposed to having to stop and think about it and then, perform it. But there's also, I think, a certain level of self-actualization with it. I think there's a level of peace that comes from it. There's a level of competence that comes from it. I think that then spills over into our relationships with our loved ones and coworkers. I think it spills over into the quality of our work. Honestly, for me, and this is going to sound a little zinny or Yoda-y or something, but I find that I have much more patience about stuff. I feel like I get a little bit more zinny about those little naggy things that happen at home or whatever that, that would have freaked me out or something had I not been in this certain kind of process of developing a good mindset about this bigger goal.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think, those are the kinds of things. I think if that answers your question, I mean, I think those are the kinds of components and structure that, it's a wonderful flywheel kind of thing that builds up a momentum that has this nice, positive side effects and other things that I don't think about it in advance, but then kind of realize it either in the moment or look back, like talking about it now with you guys, to kind of look back and go, I didn't realize it at the time, but yeah, that's a nice bonus.
Yeah. Running a marathon turns the volume down on, when the PDF won't save properly.
Right. Well, and again, because I'm so much older, but I tell you, like my old joke used to be that, like because I don't think there was hardly any point in my life where I didn't at least have, 2.5 jobs of something, of teaching someplace and writing a book and having a private practice and blah, 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 blah. And then add, training, add have a family, add have a life, add travel, etc. And I used to joke, and then I used to joke that back in the day, this is when people wore beepers and you didn't have cell phones outside of your car. And it would be like, when I'm on the side of a mountain, I am not thinking about my beeper. I am not thinking about, the beeper doesn't reach me. And, and you are so focused in that moment. And again, for me, it kind of bifurcates, like when it is that race, when it is that mountainside, when it is for reals, that's different, and that's kind of this odd, meditative, hard to put words to experience.
Sure.
Versus the training part of it, that part of it, there's a focus, but your mind is in this, or my mind is in this different place. Maybe others experience this as well, to have that creative thing of either, you're problem solving, or you come up with a new idea about something, or, I never really thought about it this way, or whatever. So, there's that part of it. To me, makes me feel like, my podcast is called Living a Life in Full. That part, to me, is what's living a full life. That none of these things are, you hear so much about people compartmentalizing things or whatever, which has its place and is great and is helpful.
Sure.
But for me to have everything being kind of integrated and synthetic and infused and threaded together, that resultant fabric, if I can be kind of corny and cliche about metaphors, is that it makes me feel like a very comfortable life, where I don't have to stop and think about, ooh, should I eat this? Because it's a habit now of how I eat. Ooh, will this screw up my sleep? Probably not, because I'm kind of got this lifestyle now that kind of everything is moving. Nothing's in contradiction, with what it is that I'm doing. And I think that also morally and spiritually makes me feel aligned, that I'm not, and we're all, there's things that might look like, like being a hypocrite, because I believe two different things that are opposites. I can believe those both are true simultaneously. I can hold two opposing ideas in my head simultaneously. Yeah, that's not being a hypocrite. That's kind of being open to diversity. So it's. Sure. I think all of these things kind of fit in nicely together, and that I try not to be evangelical or preachy about it, but I just all I can say is that I found a nice way that works for me, and here's some ideas that people can try on, and see how it works for them. So, but the mindset, I think, is a generalizable kind of thing, that you just you put your own interests into that structure, and work it out to to your best goal, your best ends.
Right.
That's really good.
Well, Dr. Stout, I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us. We will link to Dr. Stout's podcast and YouTube channel in the show notes. You could find those at fitafter40.substack.com. Dr. Stout, once again, thank you so much for your time. I thought this was a great conversation. I really got a lot out of it.
Well, thanks. I appreciate the opportunity to do this. It's nice to speak with kindred spirits, and I'm real impressed with your show and the activities and things that you guys have as well, too. So a big shout out, and be happy to share this as well with all my audience as well, because I suspect we've got a good Venn diagram of who listened to you guys and who listens to us. So that's great. It's good to be in touch, and let's take this as a start. Let's keep in touch with each other, and share tips and tricks, and I appreciate the time today.
Absolutely.
I think there were so many topics today that I would like to just have a whole hour to talk on. I just totally on the same wavelength. Like I view ultras as a spiritual experience, and I think most people that really love them do. Hear. And just that self-reliance out in the woods, and I can tell that you really have to share that same passion and love for just that type of activity,
just being out there.
Thanks.
Feeling,
yeah. Well, thanks. I appreciate that. I appreciate that, you guys. Thanks so much. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, let's keep in touch. Good luck with everything.